I'm Dick Rogers. This is a video about the banks and what's gone wrong with the banks. I've got 12 of these cards. This is the first one. Banks create money out of nothing, and it's a blooming liberty. You're not allowed to, I'm not allowed to, but the banks, by custom and practice, have adopted to themselves the right to do it, and the government allows them to. 97% of all the money in circulation in our country is created by the banks out of nothing. It's not money they got from somewhere else, it's just money they magicked into existence. And I don't think that's the right way to go. In fact, it's even worse than 97% being this sort of money, because the banknotes and coins that the public authority, but the Bank of England and the Mint produce are created by public authority, but it's only they don't circulate as fast as the electronic money, and 99.9% almost, something of that region, of the money of transactions in our country is this electronic bank-created, commercial bank-created money, rather than government money. The second thing is that it cripples us, and we've got to change the system, otherwise we're finished really as a country. We'll be crippled, we'll live in poverty, and we've got to change the system. It'll cripple us because banks create money in the act of lending money out, and they lend it for buying houses, and it doesn't make more houses, it just makes the house price go up, which leaves people homeless because they can't afford it unless they borrow lots and lots of money. If they do, they have to work all their life to pay it back, but the bank has only just magicked it into existence, and yet people are having to spend their lives labouring away to earn real money to pay it back with. It weakens industry, because industry is not an attractive investment to banks, because if the bank wants the money, it can't get it unless it waits its time and the industrial process is finished. And so it makes governments weak, it makes our economy very unstable, with boom and bust. Why is it a problem if banks create money? There are two parts. I got a card for each. The first problem is that when banks create money, they create it as a debt, and this means that virtually all the money in circulation in our country is not an asset of the nation as it should be, but a debt to the businessmen who run banks. And so much of the money is that kind of money that this money is at interest, and we have to get money to pay the interest. How do we get the money to pay the interest? Well, the answer is we have to borrow more, and we have to keep borrowing. We have to keep growing, so that that'll only work in a growing economy, and we have to grow for the benefit of the banks and not for the benefit of society. On the other hand, if the Bank of England were the sole creator of money in our country, as I believe it should be, then the money it creates and puts into existence under the system I advocate would be an asset of the nation. It would be owned by society as a whole. It wouldn't be something that we have to pay some other self-interested person interest on. It would be money that we have devised, we have created out of nothing. The other part, number 4, of the problem of banks creating money is who gets this newly created money. If the bank allocates it, it goes into houses, as I've said. If the Bank of England, the public authority, creates the money, it can give it to the government, which can put it into something that actually benefits society, like the means to earn a living in the world and have a productive economy. Things like getting our infrastructure working properly, training up people really well at universities and technical institutions, and developing really good products which we can sell on the export market. So how do banks actually create this money? And there's two ways in which they do it. One is by fractional reserve banking, and the second is by the securitization of mortgages. Fractional reserve banking works like this. If you take £100 in banknotes and put it into a current account at your high street bank, that bank will lend out almost all of that money to somebody else, which I think is a cheek, because you are perfectly entitled by the agreement with the bank to come back and ask for that money back today even, or tomorrow, and yet the money has been lent out to somebody else. And it's a very unstable way to run a bank, and it makes banking a pretty nerve-wracking business, I think, because they're worried always about having a run on the bank. People wanting to come along and say, I want my money back, I don't trust you, I'll have my money back now. And if everybody wants their money back, the money isn't there, and that's a real problem. Now, if you put £100 in a current account, say 10% is kept in reserve, that means that 90% of the money will be lent to somebody else, and they will spend it on something, and the person receiving the money will bank the £90. 90% of that will be lent out, releasing £81, which will be lent to somebody who will buy something, and that will be banked, and 90% of that, and then 90% of that, and so on. So it will be lent out, spent and banked, lent out, spent and banked many times over. And it means that there are lots of people using the £100 that you think is there safe in the bank. And it's a jolly wobbly situation. It means, I calculated, that if that went round 20 times, if 20 people were lent the money and spent it, banked it and so on, that £790 would have been created out of nothing. That is really just fictitious money on the basis of your £100. Or if only 5% was kept and 95% at each step was lent out, then it would be £1,218, which has been magicked into existence out of the £100 that you put in the bank in the first place. The second way is by the securitization of mortgages. The second way that banks create money. And I think I've understood this right, but I'm open to correction. If you take £200,000 from a bank to buy a house, the bank knows it's going to get your promise to repay that money in instalments over 25 years. But what it then does is it sells it to a dealer in mortgages. It's called securitization. And it won't have to wait for the 25 years to get the money, because the dealer will pay them certainly a large whack of that money up front, tomorrow. And that means that there's a whole lot of money that they can then lend out to somebody else and get their repayment. And there's so much coming and going. I think the banks get ahead of themselves and lend you money that they know they're going to get from the sale of your securitized repayment agreement. But it creates a whole cloud of money that doesn't actually, it's just magicked into existence. It's not real money. So, number 6, how are we going to stop banks creating money out of nothing? Well, I confess I don't quite know what to do about the securitization of mortgages. I think other people are working on that. But I can see about fractional reserve banking that when you deposit money in a current account in a high street bank, the high street bank shouldn't touch it. They should keep its mitts off it. And in fact, actually, I think that it shouldn't even stay in that bank. It should go straight through that bank into a safe account at the Bank of England, with the security of the government behind it. And then, even if the high street bank goes bust, your money will be quite safe in an account which hasn't been touched in the Bank of England. The High Street Bank won't be able to lend it out and make an interest. You might therefore have to pay a little bit for running the system. But because it'll be easier to start a bank, there'll be more banks doing it. It'll be a simple, pretty risk-free procedure. It's just a bit of electronics, really. And so I think the competition of companies running that service will make it, it'll keep the price right down to the absolute minimum. So I think that's the way to do it. I think banks should refrain from lending out current account money to other people. Then I think the great thing is that it'll stop boom and bust. It's the solution to the instability in our economic system. Because at the moment, if there's a tendency to inflation, the monetary policy of the Bank of England raises the bank rate, which means that other banks have to follow. So it becomes more expensive to borrow money. So less of this money is created by banks lending because less people want to borrow it. And so that means that there's less money in circulation, and then the inflation rate comes down because less people are spending money. The trouble is it's a very uncertain way. There's so many unknown quantities and just sort of human decisions in between, and it takes a year or two for that to take effect, I understand. And it's pretty rough on you also if the government encouraged you to borrow money last year, and now it puts up the interest rate, and so you're landed with a whole lot more interest to pay than you had when you took it out. And people find it very difficult to pay their mortgages because they've taken out a mortgage they can afford at the time, and then the bank rate goes up. So I think it's not a good system. The better system, I think, is for some body like the monetary policy of the Bank of England to meet regularly and decide how much money is needed to be circulating in the economy of Great Britain, and if we need a bit more, to create it and to give it to the government of the day to spend into circulation on things that actually do some public good, like developing our infrastructure, university and technical education, development of goods and services, things like that, that make a productive economy thrive. Now, how do I know that any of this is the case? And the answer is I don't. I freely admit that. But there's a lot of mystique about this, and I don't think when things are full of mystique that it's a healthy business, and I think usually somebody's trying to hide something. I do notice, though, that in the years around 2005, before the financial crisis, the British economy was growing only by about 2%. The GDP, the Gross Domestic Product, was growing by about 2%, whereas the amount of money in circulation, the M4 money supply, was growing by about 14%, far, far in excess of the actual growth of economic activity in the country. So somebody is making a lot of money, bringing a lot of money into existence that doesn't bear any relation to real economic activity. The other thing is that senior people who know about these things do tell me that banks do create money. And then also there's the fact that the banks don't want to talk about it. So I don't like that situation. I think that makes me think that I am onto something. Even the press and the government don't want to talk about it, although some MPs are beginning to do so. And we have to be careful of red herrings, because I think the bonus issue, the issues of bankers' bonuses, that's a red herring. The bonuses aren't the problem. It's the activity that the bonuses encourage, which is lending to people and creating money in the process to the bankers or the bank's own enrichment. So that's the real problem. Banks have been offering to increase their reserves, to increase the percentage they keep in reserve from any transaction, but that's a red herring. The It doesn't stop fractional reserve banking. Am I asking for the nationalisation of banks? Should we nationalise the banks? Absolutely not. I want banks to be able to operate, to earn an honest living. In principle, they're supposed to be connecting savers with people who need to borrow money. And that's a perfectly legitimate thing for them to do, to attract savings by offering savers a good rate of interest, but charging a little bit more for people who want to borrow it to buy a new machine for their factory or something like that. That's fine. And that's best done on a commercial basis so that they're making wise decisions and don't lend to people who can't pay back. But the thing that they shouldn't be doing is they shouldn't be getting their hands on people's current account deposits, because it's ruinous for the country and it costs the government a lot of money when a bank goes bust and people lose money. They shouldn't be at risk of losing money, because the money should go straight through that bank to be to a safe account at the Bank of England. 10. The present system leaves governments poor and banks rich, governments weak, banks powerful. Credit rating agencies, it leaves very powerful, and it's not the right thing to do. We should have a powerful government which should be answerable to the people under the normal democratic process, but it's not sensible to have a system where unaccountable banks have the power and the government doesn't have the power. 11. Do we need to wait until the whole world gets this sorted out, or can we make a decision now about this in Britain and do it on our own? And I think we can. I think that we could get this sorted out in Britain to stop current account money being lent out. And I think it would rapidly give us a reputation for having a sound economy, having the courage to make wise decisions, and people would follow us very quickly. And even if we do really ideally need a global solution, we are a leading economy. We should be out and about advocating this answer on the global scene. And 12, what can you do about it? You can do 3 things, I think. Read about it or learn about it from different ways. And there's some things to read on the website here and links. Then go and meet your MP. It isn't the banks that need to be persuaded. The banks will exploit the situation as much as they can, I would imagine. Really, as people in business, and they want to make money. But the people who can control the situation are the government. They do need to understand the situation to start off with, and then have the courage to do the right thing. Now, if you go and email your MP, write to your MP, go and meet him, take somebody else along. If the MP still isn't persuaded, you could raise a petition, you could have a public meeting and things like that. In the final analysis, in a democratic society, and the reason why this is a political party is that the answer is, if the MP won't do what he should do, or what she should do, then stand against them at the next election. And I'd love to talk to you about that if you would be interested in doing it. I think it's better to take to go and see the MP, to ask them first if they will change their tune. But if they really won't, then it's a thing to stand for election about. It's a crucial issue, and we will be paupers, and our ideals will disappear from the world scene unless we manage to get our economy on a proper footing. And a proper footing means stopping the commercial banks from being able to create money out of nothing, and giving that right exclusively to a public institution, the Bank of England, to do on behalf of society as a whole. Thanks very much indeed.